Good morning, everyone. Firstly, Marta, I'm very pleased to be here, and thank you very much to Lancaster, to Dan, Jeff, and to Nick for their introductions and their excellent work. Actually, I was hoping to get the first bit of audience participation in myself, but Nick beat me to it. So we're going straight into that, what was going to be the first bit. I'm here representing the ICT Knowledge Transfer Network, which is an endeavour funded by the Technology Strategy Board in the UK. Can I please ask for a show of hands, who has heard of the KTNs before, or the ICT KTN? Okay, great, that's not bad. For those that haven't, we have all our usual mission statements. I like to sum up our purpose quite simply in a sentence which I wrote, which says, with rather a lofty aim, we conduct activities to benefit UK industry and hence raise the economic stature of the UK. That's one of my favourites. We do quite a lot as well, you know, there's quite a lot into that. And I would ask you please, my sales plug is, would you please go to www.ictktn.org.uk, be at the end. That's where all our activities are discussed, and you can join the club. It's free to join and get involved with what we do and where we're doing it. Personally, I'm employed by Kinetic. I've been seconded into the cybersecurity area of the ICT Knowledge Transfer Network and its various derivatives, and Kinetic has run this area since 2006. So pleased to be here today to talk to you about a growing subject, cybersecurity. You did say it advances. I'm sure you've heard an awful lot about the doom and the gloom and the attacks, and it's all useless and we might as well all go home because we're all being raided by everyone on the internet and in cyberspace. But it's not all doom and gloom, and my presentation is split into two halves, and the first half probably is doom and gloom. It's about the attacks. The second half is a much more sensible thing of, well, so what are we going to do about it? I'm going to go into the sort of attacks at a very, very high level. I recently actually had to go into them at quite a detailed level. Now, bearing in mind that the first attacks really started, first hacking, that sort of thing, very late 80s, it took me over 2 hours to go into just the basics of all the attacks that have affected us since that date. So you're pleased to know I'm not here for 2 hours, so I won't be going into that sort of level. But I will talk very roughly about what I consider to be the four main areas that you have to bear in mind when you're looking at protecting your businesses. And this isn't just about protecting your systems, this is about protecting your businesses. It starts off with an old terminology, script-kiddies. For those of you with children, if you've got any that go and sit in a dark room and they're in their early teens and you don't see them for hours, what they're doing actually is probably not what you think. They're probably hacking systems. Because this is how it starts. We have a lot of young people who are very, very clever, but they're very introverted. And perhaps they don't get on very well with the normal social structures we expect and we try and force on them. So they develop their own, and they start becoming knowledgeable about systems, and they start reading books and they start getting information online. Why? Well, in the words of themselves, there's nothing else to do. They don't like going out and playing in playgrounds and this sort of thing, and we try and stop them smoking drugs on street corners. So instead, they sit in their rooms and they discover they can start finding out some quite interesting things about the computer systems out there. And they feel a sense of achievement. And already they start to realise that even at that early stage, these people are probably more skilled than the majority of people that configure systems out there today. And they start to practice their skills. And sooner or later, they meet other people like themselves. And they form little hacking groups. Now, at this stage, there's a great deal of requirement on them to prove themselves to their peers, and they start exchanging information. They may have secured a lot of usernames and passwords for a site that's not particularly important, But they trade them. They say, hey, I can prove I'm pretty good because I got these. And if you give me the password to this system, hey, I'll give you the password to this system. And they start building this interaction. Now, years ago, this was absolutely hidden. In other words, these people did not want to be discovered in any shape or form. They didn't want their activities to be discovered. That was part and parcel of what they were doing. They wanted to impress their friends and outdo each other, but it was very much a closed shop. But the one thing is that they had extremely high moral standards. It all started out, they wanted to make free telephone calls. And you could argue the very first instance was in 1957. A blind Mexican boy discovered that when he whistled down the phone, there was a click, and he could dial anyone in the world free of charge. His whistle was 2600 hertz, and it reset the entire telephone system in the US. It wasn't long before the whistles were made and included in packets of cereal called Captain Crunch. And indeed, they were then made by a couple of people who sold them and put their money they earned into a little company. The chap's name was Steve Jobs. Don't know if you've heard of him. But the most important thing was that he never stole credit card details or anything like that. They got credit card details, so they did steal them, really, a mistake there. They did steal them, but they only used them to pay for their phone calls into the computer systems that they could then use to hack. They did not buy anything on those credit cards. That was considered not the right thing to do. Sadly, we don't have that sort of ethos now. When these people grow up a little bit, we have this threat, the hacktivists. Now, this is pretty new. The term's been around for some time, but over the last, 3-4 months, these people have entirely changed the threat against our businesses. They call themselves hackers, or rather the press calls themselves hackers, but they're not really. They're a group of people whose stated aim is to cause complete mayhem on the internet. Sadly, they do very well at it. And we have some groups called Anonymous, LulzSec, there are others, Team Poison, who over the last few months have wreaked havoc. And a lot of it people try and play down because, of course, acknowledging it is half the problem. But okay, what have they been up to? Well, I always think it's worth it saying a little bit about the name as well, because name's always interesting. LulzSec, for example, started out as the abbreviation LOL, laugh out loud, that we often send on text, or at least younger people. I don't. Somebody added an L to that because they decided that a single laugh out loud wasn't really laughing, sort of, so to have lots of laughs, plural, LOLS, lols. That got changed to lulz, L-U-L-S, and then to L-U-L-Z. Why? Have no idea. The word lulz became to mean for the hell of it. We used to say, why do you climb a mountain? Because it's there. Well, the computer hackers, the hacktivists say, why do you climb a mountain? For the lols. They attack a company for the lols. It just means because we can, it's there. And that's the sort of people we're facing. They use their hacking skills to attack organisations they dislike, but they claim to be completely leaderless. Now this, in some ways, is very useful for us. In other ways, it isn't. Because they literally ask people online, who should we hack? Who should we bring down? And somebody says, hey, I hate this company A because they made me wait in the queue last week. And before you know it, you've got 30,000 people going, yeah, let's attack that company then. There've been some beauties. It started out with the American soldier who leaked American military information. And some actions were taken, and some organisations which provided various services, of which Amazon one, were attacked by a group called Anonymous. And it's gone on since then. And Anonymous and LulzSec over the last few months have wreaked havoc in the CIA, the FBI, the UK's soccer, and perhaps one of the best, Sony. Sony, there were two lessons to be learned from Sony. I was quite surprised. The first one is that after being attacked and losing millions of pounds several times, they announced that they were putting in place a Chief Information Security Officer. Bit late. Secondly, of course, it did come out that Sony had fired about 10 people from their network security department in the 2 days preceding the attacks. Probably not a good idea, and something we'll be coming back to later. But they do cost businesses a lot of money. They're a right pain, but they're out there, sadly, and they're working hard against us. Who's heard of flash mob? Does anyone know what flash mob is? Another show of hands. Okay, you've probably seen the adverts on television, normally for a mobile phone or internet provider, when lots of groups of people suddenly start dancing around in a main public place, and before you know it, the whole of Paddington Station is all dancing around. That's called flash mob, where you get literally a load of people in to do something for a very short time, i.e. in a flash. Well, LulzSec last week passed 45,000 followers on Twitter. So they've got a huge pool of people out there who are willing to listen. And if they find a cause, the chances are there'll be a large percentage of that number of people who would be willing to use commonly available tools to attack systems just because they can. It's almost ceased to carry the fact that it's illegal. It's almost become a bit of a game, and a very dangerous one. One of the main areas that are driving these groups are what your company does. Are they green? Do they treat people well? Very often it's just for the hell of it, anti-capitalist. There's often no real rational explanation. But sadly, these groups can cause companies a great deal of trouble. And just to close on this particular one, I thought one of the funniest aspects is because they don't have leaders, they have a lot of people that attack companies just off their own bat and then claim to be doing it under the titles of Anonymous and LulzSec, which annoys them incredibly. What annoys them even more is when they launch the attack, but then they don't get the credence for it. And indeed, there was times when they were shouting very loudly, it wasn't those people that attacked company A, it was us, it was us. This does give us, obviously, options to cause a bit of problems in their camp as well. And this was seen when it was suddenly announced that they were going to attack Florida. And somebody said, well, how are we going to attack Florida? And one of them said, well, what we'll do is we'll bring down any website to do with any tourism in Florida. Let's go. 30,000 people go, hey, that's a good idea. Yeah, well, count me in. We'll do that. And then there was a message from the so-called, well, a group that doesn't have a leader, has a leader. And it said, why are we attacking Florida? So there's not much harmony in the ranks. But they're still not serious. The serious hackers got very, very cross. And they said, you're not hacking. All you're doing is using easily available tools to launch denial of service attacks against people. You're really annoying us because you're taking down sections of the internet that we want to use to hack people. That's no good at all. And serious hackers don't use denial of service. A serious hacker would be horrified if he brought down a computer system. They don't want to be found. They want to use the computer system, so they don't want to ruin them. So before you knew it, there was a couple of groups that actually started to attack the other hacking groups. And they said, unless you stop doing this, we're going to hack you, because you're not hackers. These people are far more serious. These are very, very skilled people, and you won't hear about them, because if you do, they've failed. And these are the people that are also causing a lot of trouble at the moment. You've probably heard the term APT. If not, we'll come to it. Why? Well, they know that data has a value and they don't want to just stop it. They want to steal your data and they want to sell it. Largely, that's credit card information, personal information, even just a name and an email address can be very useful because it means that that's one email address they've got that they know there's a person on the end of. And they can then match that with other bits of information and they can usually build up a profile about an organisation. And that becomes important for phishing attacks, as we'll come to. They might also steal intellectual property. If you're a company who's in technology or where intellectual property is your lifeblood and securing your future revenue, then they want it because they can sell it. And they can sell it either to a government, if, for example, it's a design for a new jet engine or something like that, or they can sell it to your competitor. And there's always a buyer for data. Most of the people who fall into the category A hacker mark work for organised crime because they pay the most. There are highly organised and skilled groups, and they use what we know as botnets. I'm sure you've all heard of them. Corruption of the word robot network. And what it is, it's your PC at home, in your bedroom or your lounge, plus a few in the office at work, and somebody's got in, they've compromised those machines and they've gone away again, and you don't know, and those machines are then used. And as we've experienced an increase in processing power, it's not even possible to tell if your machine is being used when you're using it as well. And it's quite happily sending out emails to people, trying to commit fraud attacks, maybe even using a bit of processing power to crack a bit of encryption. Why waste that processing power? It's used to go out and steal identities. It's used to circulate the phishing emails that we see. And that data is then sold on. To give you an idea of the magnitude of this, if I can find my right slide, a botnet. I remember when people used to be horrified and they used to say, God, it's 20,000 machines. Well, the botnet that had just been discovered called Brado Lab has in excess of 35 million machines. One person can focus the attentions of 35 million PCs and get to do anything they want. Now in practice it's very rarely one person uses the whole thing. What they do is they chop it up and they sell it. So if you're organised crime or you want to make a few 100,000 million pounds or whatever, you want to conduct a phishing scam, you pay organised crime, you hire their botnet. There's going rates. Normally one machine's about £50 for a single attack. You can choose how many machines you have. You can go online and you can order them, and you'll be given a name and a password, and you can then control however many machines you've bought for the set time. You can get them to do what you want. Then you hand them back to organised crime, who clean up the machines and they're ready to use again. But they're your machines. There's other forms, just before I leave that slide, other forms of crime as well. The majority of them we see now is the phishing attacks, and we'll come to that a little bit more detail later, or maybe now. It's become known as spear phishing. Originally there was phishing, which you just send out hundreds of millions of emails to any email address you've got, and you go, oh, by the way, your account's being closed at such and such a bank. Can you just fill in your name and address and password to your bank account here, please? Pretty basic stuff. Sadly, still about 20% effective. You know, just an email asking you for your password. But that got old hat, and they started to go for spear phishing. Spear phishing is using a lot more effort to socially engineer an email, and this is probably the biggest threat that the UK faces at the moment. You build up, you look at LinkedIn, you look at Facebook. I found out maybe that company A, the MD, likes golf. I send him an email purporting to be from St Andrews Golf Club. Here, you're a big fan of golf, open this attachment and find out, or follow this link, see how you can have a free day at our golf course, all expenses paid. You watch, you'll open that email or follow that link quicker than a flash. Done. The link can just divert to the golf club site then, so he arrives at the web address for St Andrews Golf Club or whatever, and he thinks, oh great. What he doesn't know is, of course, it's known as drive-by. He's followed the link is taken to a computer system that contains malware, it's downloaded the malware to his PC, and then it's redirected him to the proper site. All happens in microseconds. So, phishing emails, it's all about social engineering. Came, of course, from the original 419 scam, for those that may remember receiving a letter maybe in the early 70s from Nigeria saying, I'm being held by the Nigerian police. I've got an absolute fortune, but they're going to take it all from me. I'll give it to you. Can I have your bank account details, please? Nation states are the other people. And it's finally dawning on people that there is a symbiotic, have I said that right, relationship, sadly, between organised crime and nation states. The first aspect here is that the nation states that you think might be guilty of this sort of underhand activity, the governments are probably not too far from organised crime themselves. And what nation states need on occasions is huge amounts of computing power, something like a botnet. Hey, who owns the botnets? Organised crime owns the botnets. So what do nation states do? Well, again, they want, and it's not just about spying and the sort of James Bond espionage that we think of when we say the word espionage. It's what is that country bidding for that contract? How can we underbid them? How can we improve our national economic prosperity? So it's about looking at what companies, as in companies in the UK and other countries, are doing. What contracts are you going for? How are you pricing? Can they get some internal information out of you? Nation states are interested in this sort of stuff. There's a lot of nation states who work on what they call the mosaic principle. They gather every little piece of information and they piece it together to form the bigger picture. And they have the people, the technology and the time to do that. So people wonder why, for example, photo frames have been found in UK retail shops that you can take home and put them in your lounge. And what you don't know about is they're actually logging onto your wireless network and sending your photograph collection to a foreign server. Why? They do. Because they find the information useful. The other side of nation-state cyber attacks is, of course, the far more elusive one and the James Bond stuff. And we've seen an example. Most people talk about Stuxnet. Everyone heard of Stuxnet? It did get okay, perhaps the most... Is that as one gentleman? Anyone else heard of Stuxnet? Good. Wow, not as many as I'd thought. Okay. The most sophisticated cyber attack yet discovered, launched, brought down a basically nuclear system, nuclear production system. I'm come prepared today to talk too much about this. Suffice to say, it carried 5 different, what's known as 0 days. 0 days of vulnerability in a system that hasn't yet been made public or known, and they can sell for huge amounts of money. So to put an exploit out with several in shows that whoever constructed that has got a lot of power behind them. It carried fake certificates. Those certificates were actually changed when they were discovered. So very, very active attack. It was still introduced on a USB stick, but it sought out SCADA system control systems for nuclear centrifuges, and it disabled the monitoring systems. It recorded the monitoring. It played the monitoring back so that the system thought everything was okay. And then what it did was it just varied the rotational speed of the centrifuge by a tiny, tiny amount every few days, enough to bring a nuclear program to its halt. Was a nation state involved? Well, no one has put up their hands and said yes. But I'll put it to you, it would be very difficult not be. But I also say it would probably be very difficult to do that without some involvement of crime as well. There has only been one cyber attack on a nation state that has been claimed, and that's one by Mr. Reagan, who discovered that Russia needed some technology to improve the monitoring systems on their Siberian gas pipeline. He discovered that the Russians were going to steal this piece of technology they needed, which effectively was computer code, from the company in Canada who'd written it. So he accidentally replaced the piece of code on the Canadian company's systems with some malware. And the hungry Russians came and took it and installed it. The result was the biggest non-nuclear explosion seen from space that we have yet encountered. And America admitted to doing that. That's the gloom and doom. How am I doing for time? Whoa, I've got to get going, haven't I? What can you do about it? Well, there's going to be some people here today that tell you better than I what to do about it. There's a lot of exhibitors here with technology. We've got Get Safe Online here, excellent repository for helping you protect your systems. You don't need Fort Knox, but you do need to protect your system appropriately. And to do that, we use something called risk management. I'm sure that many of you will recognize the basic points here. The most important thing is knowing what assets are critical to your business, what data, what systems. If they're not critical to their business, then frankly you're not that interested in them. Because what you're out to do here is to spend as little as you can, but protect your business to an appropriate degree, not to lock everything away. Define the threats and vulnerabilities against you. And on that, sites like Get Safe Online can help you. It's not an area that most people are aware of. And occasionally it is necessary to employ the services of a security consultant to help you there. You assess the impact. You say, okay, if it all goes horribly wrong and this particular critical asset is attacked by these people, what happens? Is my company going to have to close down for a day? Is it going to have to shut down? How long is it going to take to clean up? Do I really need to spend money protecting against that? You need to document your decisions because things change, and you'll find that you may well need documented evidence that you've actually thought about these risks, even if you decide to do nothing about them. So only then can you start looking at how to spend your budget on adequate protection that's not over the top. But the bit that everyone misses off is measure. It's no wonder it's so hard to demonstrate return on investment when you start talking about security measures. Anything else you do, you measure to see if the money you've spent is well done. So one of the things I would want everyone to pick up is try and actually look at what the measures are achieving. Look at the logs from your firewalls, this sort of thing. Say, hey, is this actually doing anything? A lot of people spend the money and put the stuff in some instances for compliance, regulatory reasons, but they don't actually use it. So they've spent the capital, but they're actually deriving very little benefit. And that's a great shame. And you generally find the larger the organization, the larger the problem there. Base it around good practice, people, process and technology. Most people concentrate on the technology. I deliberately put it in that order because I think that's the order of importance. Sadly, people, as well as being your biggest asset, are therefore your weakest link. As you heard me say, the world's most advanced cyber attack on Stuxnet was introduced somebody plugged a USB stick into a Windows computer, and from there it went to its target. The person, USB sticks, still one of our biggest problems. Ensure anyone working for you has basic training and they know about a suspicious email. Don't follow links. Where you get one of those blue links in an email, if you click on that, the coding behind that in the HTML in your email can send you anywhere. So don't follow it. Very easy way to take a lot of protection is to just copy it and paste it into a browser and then go. Not 100% effective, but a lot better than just following it from the email. Make sure you've got security policies in place. They needn't be huge and lengthy, depending on the size of your organization, depends. But make sure that you know how you expect your employees and your staff to treat their phones, their laptops, and you have what's called an AUP, acceptable use policy. Can be very simple, can be very complex, all depends on your needs. The staff of a third-party provider become yours. This is one of the most important things. I had to do a cleanup exercise in a very, very security-aware company recently, whereby they had 30 spear phishing emails come in and reach their targets, and they were able to quantify that through the firewall. Out of those 30 people, 20 people reported them to the help desk, and they said, we would be pleased to know we haven't opened these are suspicious. 10 people opened them, they cleaned up those 10 systems. The next thing they know is the figure had shot up, and sort of 50 people had opened the email, and they thought, well, how? We haven't had 50 emails in through the system, so how can 50 people have opened them? The help desk were so interested, they navigated their way to the desktop and opened them themselves. Something to be learned. consider background checks. Consider. It's not easy how you do them, but it can mean a lot if you can do them. Again, it depends a lot on where you are in the size of organisation and that sort of thing. Process, a big one, starter and leaver process. One of the biggest problems, somebody leaves the company, hey, they've still got full access to the accounts. Think I'll just log on, take all this work that I did at your company and give it to your competitor. Or even worse, sabotage your systems. Very popular. We have taught people that data is valuable, and they now know. Look at near-miss incident reporting. You do it with health and safety. Are you having any incidents to do with security? Again, regular awareness briefings are really useful. And they're just things like, remember not to open that email, because with passage of time and pressures of work, we tend to forget the basics. They do have to be reiterated. Can you all remember what colour a water fire extinguisher is? I'm sure you've all been taught at some stage, but can you suddenly remember? Well, you occasionally have to go through retraining. Code of connection for third parties, and this will be one of our topics this afternoon. Again, you might be, rather than auditing your third party and saying, how secure are you? Because if you're connecting to me, you need to be secure. They might already have a standard that achieves that. One of the known standards is ISO 27001. If a company's got that, then you know from a security angle, that's pretty good. Sadly, it's really very expensive to get ISO 27001 and maintain it, and it really is only for very large organisations. But there are now opportunities arising for smaller compliance methods that demonstrate to your customers that you have taken security clearly. And I think we've got IASME this afternoon. There's Richard Henson from Worcester over there, and that's a perfect example. If you don't need data, don't keep it. Why? Backup and restore. I think I can quote the name. I worked for British Gas for many years. In that period, we ran DEC microvaxes. For 2 years, I ran a team of people that laboriously came in every single night, plugged a tape into a DEC microvax and backed up all the stuff on that machine. We then stored it in a site. We had a whole year's worth of tapes. We rotated them round. We took them off site. Hey, we had a fantastic backup procedure. And what we did is we plugged the tape in. The tape would spin away for about 10 minutes, and then we'd take the tape out and put it in the cupboard. One day we had a failure, and we came to realize, and we plugged it in. Every single tape we'd ever done was completely blank. The spinning was the tape tensioning. It didn't actually back up any data. So don't trust your backups. Try and restore. Mistakes do happen. Sorry, I'm going over your break a little bit. Secure disposal, getting rid of stuff. I haven't done this. I always want to do that. You can now buy hard disks on eBay. There are people that will go around a tip or getting any hard disk and they'll put it on eBay. And the reason they do that is because people now know there's value in data and people will have a look and see what's on it. I've come up with the idea of making myself a few pennies by buying some cheap old hard disks, writing the word restricted or secret on them in red felt tip pen, rubbing it with a bit of sandpaper to make it look like it's old, then putting it on eBay. I understand there's a 50% premium. But in seriousness, people do now look on drives and this sort of thing. So when you get rid of a PC or think, where's it going? That drive will end up on eBay, and we see it all the time. And there are regular cases of companies being blackmailed. People buy the disks and then blackmail the company not to release the data on them. Finally, technology. Don't bin your firewall just yet. It does still have a very, very good purpose. Antivirus, perhaps one of the most successful sort of regimes in our lifetime regarding cyber attacks, works extremely well. So make sure but even though the attacks are now far more sophisticated, that doesn't mean that you can do without the basic protection. Try and look at protection not just from a point of view of compliance. If you are any form of regulated industry or anything like that, try and look at all the information that is available. You do all have logs. Assuming you have a computer, minimum, you have logs. Think about looking at them. If you can't look at them, think about taking them just to someone who can, just saying, is everything here I should be worried about? Patching. try and patch. There's a school of thought now where, you know, it's actually impossible to patch everything. So try and limit what you have. Don't have applications and programs and services you're not using. You know, whenever we used to build hard servers, as we called them, the first thing we do is take the server and get every bit of operating system off it, everything. Then we put back on the bits we need, as opposed to something like Windows that comes with everything on it and usually switched on too. If you don't need it, take it off, because that's one less thing to patch as well. And then finally, the word pen test. It's been around in the industry. I worked for a company that first did pen tests in I can't think what the date was now. We hold the record for what we think is the first pen test. Widely used in the financial industry. You don't know what these hackers, many of you around the table, I'm not being insulting, myself included, probably don't have as much skill in this than the very lowest skills in the hacking fraternity, because that's all they do. And they can get into your systems. So take some of the good ones, the ethical hackers, as they're quaintly known, or the penetration testing organisations, who employ people without a criminal record, who do this for the benefit of UK industry. And they will look at your system, they will break into your system. I don't mean they will look to see how, I mean they will. It's very unlikely that they won't get in. And they will tell you how they did it. And they'll sit down with you and discuss it and say, well look, this is really bad. This you really need to do something about right now, because this could bring down your website, or these people are taking your emails, this sort of thing. You really need to do something about this. This is probably, you know, if you've got lots of budget, then maybe address that as well. But they'll help you prioritise how to tie your system down. It's well worth having a pen test. And I think that's me done. I'd hope to allow time for questions, because as I say, I've covered things at a very high level, but maybe if you grab me over coffee might be a better idea because of timing.
Thanks, Dan. And also, you'll be on the panel.
I will indeed be on the panel, yes. The ICT KTN stand is right at the end where you come in the door from the main reception hall. Have a look there, there's a rolling presentation. It's rolling quite fast because there's a lot of slides, but there will be the presentation available as to what the KTN does. It's free to join. Please do have a look at the website. Thank you. Okay. Thank you.